Yesterday we had made a simple program on Selenium wherein I showed you all the drivers, how they are, how they work, right? What are the basic principles of programming, what is static, what is non-static. Fine. So now let's talk about these three kinds of drivers in Selenium, that is Internet Explorer driver, Firefox driver and Chrome driver, right? Now, if I have to click on a link on a page, right? How will I click it using Firefox driver? How will I click it using IE Explorer driver? And how will I click it using Chrome driver? There has to be some consistency because 2 days back a new driver was launched, that's Safari driver, right? So you need to have some consistency across the drivers so that you know what kind of commands apply to which driver. Okay, it should not be that some different commands are for Internet Explorer driver, some different commands are for Chrome driver, right? That will make things very difficult. Okay, okay, there's some noise coming up. Hold on. If you have, okay, there are three kinds of drivers: IE driver, Internet Explorer driver, Chrome driver, and Firefox driver. Now there has to be some consistency, right? When you are making the code, and there has to be some consistency in the Selenium whole API of Selenium, right? I'll create a new project called date3. Okay, in this project I'll add the Selenium jar files. This is the first thing which we need to do to configure Selenium. Yesterday I told you, right, what jar file is. It is a combination of many class files, and you need to include the jar files inside Eclipse. Okay, so I have included the jar files. Now Selenium is configured with this project. I'll make a new class called not a class exactly. I'll tell you what interfaces are first. Okay, when I tell you about interfaces, with the concept of interfaces, these drivers will be clear to you. Okay, now suppose I make a new interface called, say, bank. Fine, new interface bank. So I'll have a class called bank.java created, and inside it, instead of public class bank, public interface bank would be written. Okay, so there is something known as a class and there is something known as an interface in Java. There is a potential difference between a class and an interface. Right, now suppose I can write over here, in case of an interface, public void transfer money. This is a function inside the interface. Okay, but whatever you write, whatever function you give inside the interface, that function has not got the function body. I'll not have the function body for the transfer money function out here. I can have many functions like this, like public void credit, public void debit. So what is the use of writing like this? When I am not having any method body, I am just creating methods inside an interface. Then what is the use of writing such an interface? First of all, in layman's term, interface is just like a la carte menu. When you go to any hotel and or a restaurant and you order food, you see a menu, right? And you see what all is written inside it. You see the dish names. You decide what you have to eat and you order. You don't know how that stuff is made, right? Similarly, interfaces as well. Okay, interfaces as well, they describe what the application is supposed to do. if you go to any web-based application and if you see the code and if you just look at the interfaces, you'll come to know what the application is actually doing. So similarly, just looking at the bank interface, I can come to know what the bank is doing. It's performing 3 functions, right? And I can have a global variable in it called int minimum balance equals to some amount, right? So by default everything inside an interface is public. Okay, forget about public. You will come to know. You will actually come to know about it later on. Okay. By default, all the variables are static in nature. Even though I have not written static int minimum balance, but by default, all the variables inside an interface are static in nature. Okay, and they are final. What is final? Final is something which cannot be changed. Okay, if I go to yesterday's class in suppose testgame.java, I declare a variable in the end, final int I equals to some value. Okay, I cannot change this value after this. On the next line, I cannot write I equals to 282. So final is something which cannot be changed. Once declared, it's declared. It's there. It will there be forever. Okay, so similarly in interface, automatically by default all the variables are static and final, and all the functions by default are non-static. In an interface, all the functions are non-static in nature by default. Okay, they are not final or they are not nothing, but by default they are non-static and they don't have any body. I cannot declare a body like this. I'll get an error. Okay. The methods inside interface are known as abstract. That means incomplete methods. Abstract in English means something which is incomplete. Right. So this is an interface having some variables which are static and final. You have to initialize them. It's mandatory. And you have some functions which don't have a body, right? So what's the usage of this? The usage of this comes into picture, comes into play when suppose I have a new class called, say, Citibank. In the Citibank class, so Citibank is a bank, right? And all the features of the bank interface, that is whatever bank says, that bank will have a transfer money function, it will have a credit function, it will have a debit function, right? Okay, all the functions inside the bank should be present inside the Citibank as well, but Citibank should define the body, right? So I can make my own functions as well. I can write over here public void transfer money and give the body or whatever I have to do. But the technical way is you write like this: public class Citibank implements the bank interface. Okay, public class Citibank implements the bank interface. As soon as I write this, I get an error. This is because if a class is implementing an interface, then this class has to implement all the features of the interface bank. Okay, that means it has to implement all the functions: transfer money, credit and debit. So in order to do that, I'll move my mouse over the error and I'll get the option to fix it. The option is add unimplemented methods. So when you click on this, all the unimplemented methods they come in. That is transfer money, credit and debit. Okay, inside it I can write system.out.println city transferring and city crediting, city debiting, right? And all the three functions will have the annotation @override, which this annotation, this is known as an annotation. Okay, this tells us that this function is coming from the class bank. It is being implemented from the bank class. If you look at the code, you'll come to know, fine, if this function has got the override symbol with it, that means that it is coming from the bank interface. It's not mandatory to give it. I can also remove it. Without it also we can do. Okay, that's not a problem. But you should write it. It's a good practice. It will tell you that the stuff is coming from the other class. Okay. Similarly, the Citibank can also implement its own function like public void personal banking. Okay. Now this function is something which is coming from the Citibank class. It is not from the interface, right? So if a class is implementing an interface, it is mandatory for it to implement all the functions in the interface, okay? And it can also implement some of its own functions, right? Similarly, suppose there is a class called HSBC, right? I can write public class HSBC implements bank. So what will happen? HSBC will implement all the features from the bank interface, right? If I move my mouse over HSBC, I can click on add unimplemented features and it will get all the functions. So I just write system.out.println HSBC then for credit and then for debiting we can use like yeah, so this is about credit and this is about debit. Okay, HSBC crediting, HSBC debiting. Now what advantage do I get by writing like this? What advantage do I get? The thing is, this whole thing gives a kind of structure to my application. I know that if any bank tomorrow has to transfer a money, okay, in that bank's class there will be a function called transfer money. Okay, that will be implemented in the way that particular bank wants, because all the banks are following the rule or are following the interface bank. Interface is just like a rule book. That is, whosoever is implementing this thing will have to implement these functions, right? Like HSBC is having its own way of working, but the functions are same as the bank interface, and Citibank has a way of working which is different than HSBC, but the functions are same as the HSBC bank interface, right? How this is used in Selenium? If you open the Selenium documentation, where I download Selenium, right, and I go here on this particular page, Java doc, okay. On this you will see that here it is. This is WebDriver. WebDriver is nothing but an interface. So this is a WebDriver interface, okay, and in this WebDriver interface, WebDriver is nothing but an interface. Okay, you must have heard the word WebDriver. Okay, WebDriver is nothing but WebDriver is an interface. Okay, it's got some rules. Okay, we must follow those rules, right? That is, it's got so many functions inside it. There are so many functions inside it. Okay, and all these classes here: Android driver, Android web driver, Chrome driver, event filing driver, Firefox driver, HTML unit driver, Internet Explorer driver, iPhone, remote, Safari. All these classes are implementing this interface. Okay, so there is an interface WebDriver, and all the implementing classes are Android, iPhone, Chrome, HTML, remote, Safari. All these are implementing classes. Fine. Now, in case of WebDriver, okay. Suppose tomorrow a new browser has to be brought into WebDriver, that is, a Safari driver has to be created. Then that's or an Opera driver. Safari driver is already there. Okay. Suppose if Opera driver has to be created, fine. Then what we do is that that Opera driver will simply implement the WebDriver interface. Okay, Opera driver will simply implement the WebDriver interface. Alright, so this is the WebDriver interface, and these are the implementing classes. Fine. So tomorrow, if a new class has to become, that class will simply come and implement the WebDriver interface. Okay. Now, if I go back to my Eclipse, right? The question is, how do I use this thing? Okay. Suppose I'll create a new class called TestBank. Fine. I'll create a new class TestBank. And out here, I'll create the object of the interface, the class, or if I try to create the object of interface, if I write bank, B equals to new bank. Okay, if I write bank B equals to new bank, I'll get an error because you cannot create objects of interfaces in Java language. Okay, in Java language, you cannot create the object of interfaces. Fine. If you go down and if you try to create the object of HSBC class, say HSBC B1 equals to new HSBC. You can do that. It's a concrete class. You can create the object, and from B1 You can call all the functions b1.credit, b1.debit, b1.transfer money. You can call all the non-static functions. Similarly with the Citibank as well. Okay, I can create the object of Citibank like b2.credit, b2.debit, b2.transfer money, right? So when you run this code, it will simply give this output. HSBC crediting, debiting and transferring money, Citi crediting, debiting and transferring money. Fine. But Citibank had one more function inside it, which was personal banking. This was not coming from the interface. Okay. So in case of Citibank, I can also call that function like this, b2.personal banking. Right. Now there is a third way which is there only in case of interfaces. That is, you write the interface name bank b3 equals to new the object of the class which is implementing the interface. Now this is something different from what we have studied. We have studied name of the class reference equals to new name of the class. Out here I am writing name of the interface reference b3 equals to new name of the class which is implementing the interface. So with b3 I can access all those functions which are from the bank interface and implemented in Citibank. I can write b3.transfer money. So transfer money of Citibank will be called. I can write b3.credit. I can write b3.debit. I can write these three functions. Okay, I can write these three functions and basically all these functions from the Citibank will be called. Okay, what is the difference between this and this? The difference is that if Citibank has its own function like personal banking, I cannot call it with b3. With b3 I can only call those functions which are implemented in Citibank, the functions of the bank interface implemented in Citibank. Right? So this way, what is the advantage of this way? We will see that in WebDriver. Okay. Why do we do it like this? Okay. I'll tell you this in WebDriver that why do we do it like this. So this is about interfaces. You implement the interfaces, you create the objects, and generally we work like this. The object reference of interface equals to new class which is implementing the interface. Okay, I'll make a new class now called say Gmail. Okay, gmail.com. I'll go to Gmail, I'll try to write my simple Gmail. I'll go to Gmail and try to write my username and password with Selenium. Okay, now WebDriver is an interface. Okay, WebDriver is nothing but WebDriver is an interface, and Firefox driver, iDriver, Chrome driver, all these classes are implementing the interface. Okay, so this is my WebDriver interface. I can write something like this: WebDriver driver equals to null. Okay, WebDriver driver equals to null. That means the object reference is not pointing to any object as of now. Okay, when we work practically, we will work like this, and I'll make a string called browser type equals to, I'll make that string as say Firefox. Okay. Generally this we will read from some external source, like XML file or an XLS file or some text file or some property file, whatever it is. Okay, we will generally read the type of browser we want to test on from other file. I'm right now putting it, I'm hard coding it in the code. Okay, now WebDriver driver equals to null and browser type is Firefox. So we generally keep a if statement here. Okay, if browser type is equal to IE, then go ahead and write driver equals to new Internet Explorer driver. Now Internet Explorer driver is implementing the WebDriver interface, right? So I can write something like this, right? WebDriver driver equals to new Internet Explorer driver. Interface reference equals to the new class which is implementing that interface, right? Okay. Similarly, else if the browser type is equal to Chrome, right? If the browser type is equal to Chrome, then driver equals to new Chrome driver, right? Else if the browser type is equal to Firefox, then driver equals to new Firefox driver. So this is the advantage. This is the advantage that you just have to read the browser type from an external source and keep the WebDriver object to null and initialize the WebDriver object depending on the kind of browser we want to test on. I cannot do this if I am doing it the old way. If I write like this, Firefox driver x equals to new Firefox driver and continue like this, it becomes very difficult. Because sometimes I have to work with Firefox, sometimes I have to work with IE, sometimes I have to work with Chrome. So this way you can work with multiple browsers, okay, and using the concept of interfaces. Now with driver, okay, if you look at the documentation, all these classes are implementing the WebDriver interface. So all these classes will have all the functions which are specified in the WebDriver interface. For example, a function get function loads the web page with the current browser window. That means it takes you to a certain URL. Okay. Now this get function will be implemented by iDriver, will be implemented by Chrome driver, Internet Explorer driver, Safari, Android. Every driver will be implementing the get function, and inside the get function, each driver will have its own logic to move over to a particular website. Right. So this way out here, this way what you'll have is that you'll have a kind of consistency in the project. Okay. If I have to move to a particular URL, I can simply write driver.get http gmail.com. Fine. So I'll move over to gmail.com. Let me go to gmail.com. Oh. Okay. Uh-oh. Okay. right? On the home page of Gmail, you have a username field, you have a password field, right? So you want to enter the username, you want to enter the password. Okay, let's run this much code and see whether we are going to gmail.com or not. Okay, I'll just run this. Right, so this is the gmail.com homepage, right? It's got a username field and a password field. Alright, and if you want to write in those fields, how do I write it? Okay, how do I write in those fields? So to understand this, to be able to write inside the fields, right, you should install something in Mozilla known as Firebug. Okay, many of you might be knowing what Firebug is, many of you might not be knowing. This is Firebug. It's out here. The small icon on my Mozilla, it's Firebug icon. If I click on it, I am able to inspect the whole page. It's just like Spine QTP. Okay, if I move my mouse over the username field, I'll get the username field in the page source. Okay, it basically helps you to inspect the page source of a page. Alright, now I have to install this Firebug. For doing that, you need to simply go to Google and type download Firebug. Okay, you go to Firebug add-ons for Firefox and go here and simply download this version, whatever it is, whatever depending on your version of Firefox, you download the Firebug. Okay, it will be open this link in Mozilla. Okay, don't open this link in any other browser. I'll give it over the chat to everybody. Right, so open this link in Mozilla browser. Don't open it in any other browser. It gets installed as add-on in Mozilla. Okay, so once it is there, your Mozilla will restart and you will find an icon like this. When you click on this, you get an arrow over here. When you click on the Firebug icon, you will get an arrow out here. Through this arrow, you will be able to inspect the page source. Okay, you will be able to inspect the page source. That is, you will be able to move the mouse and you will be able to see what is there in the page source. Now, Selenium is a browser automation testing tool. It works on the basis of the page source, on the basis of the tags. All these are known as the tags. Whatever is in the conical brackets, these are known as the tags. Okay, and you need to be a little bit good at HTML language in order to learn Selenium. You know what? If you know HTML, okay, it just basics of HTML will also do. It will take you 10 times less to understand the actual features of Selenium. Okay, if you are proficient with HTML language, then it becomes very easy for you to understand how Selenium will work, because Selenium actually goes inside the page source and it works, right? So for understanding HTML, I would request everybody to go to Google and just type HTML tutorial. Just give 10 minutes of your time. Okay, 10 minutes of your time will save a lot of time later on. Okay, just go to this link on W3 Schools and study these highlighted topics. Okay, just study these topics. It's very easy. You know what, on this website for any topic, for example, I want to check what are HTML links, how they are made. So if you study it, he has got try it yourself example as well. You click on it, you can make an HTML link or whatever it is. Okay, I'm telling you this because if you have a certain good idea of HTML language, right, it will make your work very easy. Right, It might sound weird to many people, but yes, that's the thing, because Selenium, it actually goes into the page source and it actually pulls the elements out of the page source and it actually then does the testing and all everything. Okay, so this is Firebug and it helps you to investigate the HTML code of your application. Okay,